Well, hello. Welcome once again. Good to see you. Well, there's a comforting idea that people like to believe that if you ignore a problem long enough, eventually it goes away. But that's not how systems work. That's how bills work. They accumulate quietly. So far in this series, we've established something rather inconvenient, that we removed the threshold into adulthood. People didn't cross over, they stalled. Then they went looking for substitutes, and they found them, plenty of them, which raises another uncomfortable question. If we removed one of the basic structures of society and replaced it with nothing especially stable, who absorbs the cost? Because make no mistake, there is a cost. When a society stops initiating its members, it doesn't become freer. It just becomes more expensive to maintain. Sound familiar? You don't eliminate transformation, you outsource it, usually to institutions that were not designed to handle it. Paperwork stacking up endlessly, fluorescent lit office corridors, people waiting in line, slow motion. Kind of sounds like the DMV, doesn't it? Let me put this simply. If families and communities stop saying, you are now responsible, then something else must deal with the consequences of that absence. And what steps in? Not gracefully, but consistently. First, education systems. Schools used to assist in development. Now they're increasingly expected to complete it, compensate for it, and repair what was never formed. Talk to teachers long enough, and eventually they'll stop talking about subjects and start talking about stability, attention, basic consistency, not curriculum, but foundation. We sent them students. We forgot to send them finished people. Now, this is where it gets delicate, so I'll be as careful as I possibly can. Modern mental health systems are doing something profoundly important and also something they were never originally designed to do. They are increasingly asked to stabilize. To stabilize what? To stabilize identity uncertainty, delayed development, lack of direction, absence of structure. In other words, they're often treating the symptoms of missing initiation. This is not a failure of individuals, it's a shift in where responsibility lands. We've replaced the elders by the fire with appointments by the hour. Different format, same unmet need. Well, what about the legal and the civic systems? Now we move into really less comfortable terrain. When responsibility is unclear, accountability becomes reactive. Instead of guiding behavior early, systems are forced to correct it later, which is always more expensive and significantly less effective. Now, this last one people feel directly, and that's workplace environments. The employers are increasingly expected to provide structure, feedback, identity, and direction, not just jobs. We didn't eliminate the need for guidance. We moved it into quarterly reviews. Then we expressed surprise when workplaces became unstable environments for identity formation. So now we have institutions trying to manage what used to be handled earlier. Let's summarize the transfer. Families delayed responsibility. Communities withheld recognition. Culture removed thresholds. And systems tried to absorb the load. Not because they were ready, but because they were available. Now, before we go further, I would ask you to subscribe, the button's down there, if you believe to suspect this might apply more broadly than you had hoped. Share this with someone working quietly inside one of these systems. Leave a comment. I'll read them slowly, sometimes twice. They may end up in a future podcast. Or email me at info@patsanswers.com. That's INFO at patsanswers.com. And yes, the companion booklet to this series is still there. You ask by email, it's $3.99 on PayPal, less pacing, same conclusions. Now back to the hidden cost, and here's where things sharpen. Because the cost is not institutional. When no clear threshold exists, people often feel perpetually unready, quietly anxious, and structurally unsupported. Not dramatically, just persistently. I've spoken to people who say, I don't know why everything feels harder than it should. There's no event, no crisis, just friction. That friction is often not failure, it's the absence of clarity. Turns out, if no one tells you when something matters, everything becomes equally uncertain. Now, scale that across millions and millions of people. You get slower decisions, weaker commitments, and prolonged uncertainty. Not because people don't care, but because they were never given a point where caring became required. And when everything is optional long enough, serious things start to feel negotiable. Responsibility doesn't disappear, it waits. Then it shows up later with interest. So, when you ask who pays the bill, the answer is everyone, just not all at once. Next time, we'll talk about whether it's possible to rebuild a threshold without pretending we live in a completely different century. That's the difficult part. And until then, if something feels heavier than expected, it may not be what you're carrying. It may be what nobody ever handed you when they should have. Those tend to cost the most.